Welcome to this tutorial in which we will be creating a system together. And today the game system that we're going to be making is an inventory system. So let's just jump into it and see what we're going to be having as our finished product, and then talk a little bit about inventory systems and then start the process. So this is what we will be creating in this series. To explain it shortly, what we have here is to the right a bunch of items that we can pick up. And you can see what kind of an item it is here. It has a key name, a health potion for this one, and a mana potion for this one, and this one is also a health potion, but there's considerably many more in this one. So these are basically items that you can go interact with and pick up in the world. They just have placeholder meshes for them, but if you were to replace them, they would immediately look like that. And their definition of what they look like is defined within this data table. So in this data table, you just add an item that you want to have, and then you immediately have that item available to be put into the world, as long as you do a few things like adding a key name over here to this enumerator to make it easier for the code and for you to choose items, and create a blueprint for it that represents that item and what it should be doing when you actually use it. Because if we start playing here, we can run up to this item and we interact with it. You get some added information over there, and we can open up this inventory. So this is our inventory. And we have the ability to, also we have some debug text here I was supposed to remove, but I didn't. So you can just pick up these items and move them around in inventory somewhere else where you want to have them, and everything like that. And if you want to, you can also drag them out and they will be dropped in the world, and you can pick them up again if you choose to and such. In addition to that, you also have some logic which will make sure that when you pick up items of different types, they find their different places in the inventory. And if you pick up something that has of something that you already have, then you can stack it up to the max stack of it, and it continues to do that. And if there is too much in it, then it will drop that item that remains on the floor afterwards. And you can just throw out items as you choose as well, like this. And we can run back to this first one and see these are the items that remained inside of it. And in addition to this, we also have a chest over here. This is represented by a chest, and I put a hot key or a key to interact with it. So when I press F here, that emulates the ability to loot it, basically. And it has an inventory all by itself, so we can move items from it to our inventory, or we can move items from us to that inventory. And we can hide and open these inventories as we wish, and they will remember what they have in their different slots as well. And the thing with this is that this system is made around the idea of trying to make it easy to have the system added to something. So to make this chest, for example, all we needed to do was we needed to add this blueprint component that we have created that holds the inventory, and then it uses a few interfaces to interact with it in different ways. And then also it has this one function that returns if the object is supposed to have some items to begin with for us to be able to loot, like in the case we had where there was a mana potion and a health potion in it. Then this is needed to be populated with its internal inventory, so to speak, so that it gets created when it's interacted with. So basically adding a new loot bag or something like that is as easy as just creating a new blueprint like this chest, adding this component, adding a current amount of or current items in it, and then implementing that function, and then it should immediately be possible to have it appear and interact with your inventory like I just showed there. So this is in essence what we will be building in this series. However, it ended up being, while creating this, that it became a little less structured than I was hoping. So it might be a little bit difficult to follow along. I try along the way to describe everything that we're doing, but even so, there was so much jumping around that I'm not sure a cohesive image of how things are working was made. So to correct that, I'm going to do this. The very last episode of this series, I will have a description. I will go through how everything works, what actors interact with which things, how that chain of logic works, and such, for all of the different things, to give a cohesive image of how things are related to each other and work with each other. So in addition to that, I will also be trying to find some place to host this project. So if you just want to download the project and then play with it for yourself, or if you want to download the project and just watch the last episode and try to get an understanding from that, you can do that as well. Or you can follow me along the whole journey of creating the whole inventory system if you really want to try and get an understanding for how it works. Because I feel personally that doing something like a game system, like an inventory system, is something that is very valuable to do for the sense of learning, because you get to encounter a lot of different things, how to communicate with different things, and you learn about specifically user interfaces a lot, because an inventory is usually a very visual thing. But yeah, so those are the options that I will be presenting. So whenever I've found a place to host the project, I will include a link in all the related videos in the series as they come up. And yeah, I'll try to get them ready and done as soon as I can. But this became a little bit longer than I expected, so I don't know exactly how many episodes this will be at the moment of recording. But you will probably see that, because the video will most likely have a X out of Y parts or something like that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the demonstration and that you feel like this would be something interesting to follow along with. And also, in addition to all the things that I've talked about, I will also be including all the debugging that I will be doing in the project as I run into issues as well. And that might be valuable as well for the idea of how to partly debug and partly also reason your way to where could the issue be, right? And such. Anyway, I hope that made sense. I almost forgot. There was one more part in this inventory system that we've implemented as well. If we play and we run over here to the health potion, for example, and we check our inventory, we see that we have a bunch of health potions. So if I press G here, we can see our character has a certain amount of mana and a certain amount of health. And if we drink one of these potions, we can see that our health has been increased because of it. And now we can see that it's 100. And equally, if we drop one of these potions and go and pick up the mana potion, we can see that our current mana is 40, and if we drink this, we should be getting 140, like that, you see. So that's also some functionality in there. I just almost forgot about it. So here we are inside of Unreal Engine 4.26 if you want to follow along. And this should likely be very similar in Unreal Engine 5, but we can't know for sure until it's production ready and see if things have changed there. But it should be possible to recreate this in Unreal Engine 5 as well, although some things might be named a little bit differently. But hopefully the knowledge you gain by watching this will allow you to understand what you're looking for, so that you will be able to find it in Unreal Engine 5 in case you're making it in there instead. But let's talk about inventories. So there are many different types of inventories. What is important to realize when you make an inventory system, or any game system really, is that you have an idea of what it is for, so that you have taken precautions for situations before they even arise. You need to plan out what you want to do with it and what you want to be able to do with it. Now, if we were to look at inventory systems in specifics, You have here, for example, The Witcher. There are inventory systems where you can have things like both consumables and ammunition types and equipment all in the same inventory. And they can have different sizes to them in the inventory, for example. Another example is Path of Exile, where you also can have items of different sizes and very many different types of items that you can have in your inventory. Diablo is another one which uses size-based inventory management. But there are other versions as well, like Minecraft, where you have everything is basically taking up one slot and you can move them around within the inventory. And also more, should we say, different inventory types. So this one is from RuneScape, I believe. It's basically allowing you to have everything packed in sort of like, depending on how much stuff you have in there, it gets messier just because of the sheer nature of many things, right? And then you can have like limitations like weights, making sure that you don't carry too much and things like that. So there is a lot of ways you can define and create a inventory systems with a lot of features, functions, and limitations. So when you create an inventory system, you probably want to get an idea of what you want to create, basically. And when it comes to creating something like an inventory system, this is something that might be a little bit unnecessary, because if you just want an inventory system, you can get one on Epic. If you open up the Epic launcher, you can basically go here and you can search for inventory and sort it by price low to high, and you can find this inventory system here, which is in the permanently free collection, for example. So if you just wanted an inventory system, you can just get it from here if you wanted to. I believe, however, that it is very good to try to make an inventory system or several so that you learn how it is made, so that you understand things better when it comes to inventory systems. And this journey together that we'll be making to make this inventory system, you will hopefully learn a lot of things related to user interface widgets in Unreal Engine as well. With that said, there are many considerations to take into account when creating an inventory system. For example, if you have an inventory system on a character and it dies and it gets destroyed when respawned, if you wanted to keep those items when it respawns, then you might need to somehow transfer that to a new character. An option to this would be if you had the inventory on the player controller instead, then you would still have it after death, but then it feels sort of like separated from your character. Imagine that you're able to play with a female character and a male character, and you're having one inventory system. It doesn't really make sense that it's going to be the same for the female and the male. They will be carrying different things, for example. But this depends on your situation, and you can always work around it some way. But it's something to be aware of when you're constructing your system. And in addition to that, there are a lot of things that we take for granted, like the ability to drag an item from one slot to another, the ability to use items directly in your inventory and it having different effects depending on the item that you use and things like that. All of these are things that we need to consider when we create an inventory system, because we need to make sure that our system has the functionality that we need it to have. But regardless of what kind of inventory system you decide to build, it is important that you think about scalability. You do not want to have an inventory system, or any system at all for that matter, that means you have to add some additional if each time to a large code block of if statements whenever you want to scale your inventory system up in some way. You don't want to have to create an array of manually adding one widget per widget you add in your inventory system manually or anything like that either. You always want to keep your system easily scaled up, so that if any of these things I mentioned appear in your system or in your code, then you know that you're probably doing something wrong and your solution is not good, and you need to rethink your solution. Anyway, so what will be be trying to create today when it comes to this inventory system? Well, the goal I have here is something that I want to create an inventory system that's meant for looting. So the goal is to have a system that allows you to keep track of and manage your own inventory system, but you also want to be able to loot and transfer items from a different inventory. Meaning if we had, for example, a chest or a loot bag or something like that, these things would have their own inventory system, and we should be able to access them and interact with them and our inventory system at the same time. We also want to have it fairly easy to set up, so that if we want to create a chest, for example, and have it be an inventory keeping item or actor in the game, we just want it to be easily set up with as little work as possible. So that is what we will be trying to achieve as well. And lastly, we want to be able to use the items in our inventory. So these are the things that we'll be trying to create for our inventory system today. Now, these are the goals that I have for this specific inventory system. Depending on what your needs are for your inventory system, if you build one in the future, you have to take other considerations into them as your needs arises. Because inventory systems can be super complex and it can be super simple. It can be anything from just like a variable keeping track of how much gold does your character have, and that is technically an inventory system because it's something that you have like carrying around. It doesn't need to be this sort of user interface where we see here in The Witcher, for example, although this is most commonly what we expect when we talk about inventory systems. And what you need the inventory system to be used for also varies a lot depending on what kind of a game you're making, right? Some systems like Tarkov are mostly always and only about your inventory system, and then there's some shooting, of course, but mainly the inventory system is like the whole thing. Other games, inventory system is basically just a way to keep track of different numbers of different items. Other games might have a little bit more complexity, like Diablo, making sure that you can't loot too much, so you have to keep track of, okay, I'm running out of space, which things should I ditch to be able to pick this item up and such. Anyway, enough about inventory systems. Let's get started on our journey on creating this system that we've been talking about now. So the very first thing that we want to do is we want to create an item so that we can place it in the world, and this item is, when we pick it up, then added to our inventory so that we then can use it further in our inventory system. So let's start from the beginning to the end. So as we encounter more and more things and our need arises to do changes for something, we will start creating more and more things for them. So let's start with our pickup item then that we're going to be using. So the very first thing is we will likely need to have a certain set of attributes or characteristics for each item. So we're going to be making a new folder to begin with, and we're going to be calling this blueprints. Although it will not contain only blueprints, we will be keeping everything in here because we're not going to be making that many objects or classes. So it's just easily overviewed for now. But you would want to create a better structure for this, and you can always change after you're done with this if you want to keep working on the inventory system. But for now, what we want to create is a blueprint. If you go under blueprints here, you go down to structure, and we'll call this S underscore for structure, and then we'll call this item info, which is to symbolize that this is our item information, basically. Like so. Now, this might be the point where you go like, okay, what are the things that I'm going to be needing? Well, it's easy to start with usually a name. Name of the item that we're going to be having is usually pretty safe to have on any item. So let's start with a name, and this one we can for now choose to have as a string. We will be changing this momentarily. After that, A item usually has a description, something that you can show up in a tooltip, for example, if you want to. So we're going to be adding a description. That's not how you spell description. That is how you spell description. And we're going to be keeping that as a string as well. Then we add another variable, and this variable we will call icon. Because generally speaking, in an inventory system, you have a visual representation in the inventory showing you what you are going to be using. It's like, so the player can easily sort out and filter out what they are after. They're looking for the red potion, the green potion, the black sword, or something like that. So the icons is something that always comes up when it comes to inventory systems. And we're going to be choosing the type of a texture 2D. So you can find that here, and it's going to be an object reference for that. We're going to be adding another variable, and this one we're going to be calling item class. This one might be a little bit more difficult to understand for now, but this is so that our item we want to be able to have an item in our inventory and drop it into the world and have it appear as the item in the world so we can pick it up again later. And that is where our item class is going to come in. So for now we can leave it as a texture 2D because we haven't actually created the class. Actually, let's do that right now. We go back here and we create a blueprint class of the base type actor. We'll call this BP for BB underscore for blueprint, and we'll call this item pickup, like so. Now that we have created the class over here, we can go back into our structure here and we can change this type from texture to BP item pickup, and we choose the purple here, the class reference, meaning that it's keeping track of what the actual class is, not a reference to an actual object. Adding to this, we will add another variable here, and we'll call this one amounts. And this one will, like so. The point of this is to keep track of how many of this specific thing exists for a specific pickup, basically. And something that's usually very useful as well in relation to that is something we will call max stack. Actually, let's call it max amount stack, so it's really clear that these two are belonging together. And in addition to that, we should probably have a item mesh. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to be ending up using this or not, but we can change this type to static mesh, like so. And this is to be our physical representation in the world. We might use something more advanced, but most likely we will just be using primitives like cubes and cylinders and stuff like that. But just so we have it available, and it could easily be exchanged for something else. So now that we've created this whole structure, this will represent one item. We can have some default values here, making sure that we have something created by default. And this is a good thing to do because we would like to have something that shows up as if we know something is empty or isn't actually held by an item at all, then the default value could be what we use for that, basically. So we can call it dummy. We can have the description of dummy, and these we can fill in later as well. So for now, this is almost done. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to go back to our third example, and we're going to be creating a key. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to be creating a system where we're going to be creating a data table. We're going to be creating a data table so that we have everything gathered in one specific space, so that we can see that all the information related to an object can be ordered there, and if we change something there, it will propagate throughout the whole system, basically. So it will be easier to keep track of things. And to do that, we're going to be using something called an enum to keep track of our keys. So if we go to blueprints and go to enumeration, we're going to call it E underscore for enumerator, and we're just going to be calling this items. So this will be our sort of key container, and it will make more sense in a little bit. But for now, let's just add 3 rows in here. The first one we're going to be having a backslash because this one is going to be our item that's like basically no item is chosen. So it's a default dummy basically. The second one is going to be called health potion as one word, and the second one is going to be mana potion. So that is the items that we're gonna be starting off with, but then later on if you want to expand upon this, then enumerators is where you're going to be adding the key for the item. And what is this key going to be used for? Well, that's what we're going to be creating now. So we're going to be creating a data table. So our data table we can find if we go to miscellaneous and data table, and we need to pick a structure, and we have already created a structure for our item info, so we're just going to be choosing that from here. Then we press OK. Then we're going to be naming this data table dt underscore, and we can call it items, like so. So in here, let's add a row. Now you can see it's going to be called new row, dummy, dummy, and then stuff. So the first thing we want to do is we want to mark up here and press F2, and we're going to be naming the row name. The row name is going to be the key. So we're going to be calling this one health potion, spelled exactly like how we spelled it in our enumerator. And the reason for that is it will allow us to more easily make use of it later. Now, when it comes to the name here, this health potion, I'm going to be naming health potion as well, like so. And the description will say restores some hit points. And then we're going to be needing some items and icons and things like that, which we don't currently have. So let's actually take a break from making these data table items and going back to the Unreal Engine launcher again. Here, if we go to Free Permanent Fury and make sure that you have a lot of views per page so you can scroll easily, there is going to be a resource here that we can make use of. Here you can see we have a craft resources icon. So this one, you can just add it to cart and then check it out and then add it to your project, and we'll continue from there. Actually, in case you don't know how to add to projects, I just checked out the asset now, and you can see that the button has changed now to add to project, and you can just choose add to project, and you can go and find the project that you want to add it to. Click add to project. It will start downloading and adding it in, and once it is done here, you will have a folder in your project. So now it's done. There, we go back in here, we can go to third person. It will ask to import stuff in here. It shouldn't need to because they should already be imported in here, but let's just let it in case it needs to do something special. It might be needing to create some Unreal Engine files made out of specific assets in this pack. So I'm gonna be letting this process, and then I'll get back to you afterwards. That is all for this episode. Hope to see you in the next one. Keep on learning. Take care.